All right, and we are live. How we doing, gang? Just want to get back on the yellow soapbox here. It's actually the morning before level 1. It's the last level 1 of the year for me, which is pretty cool stuff. So basically I wanted to dive back into the life story. I got some cool responses, and it meant a lot to me to have you guys really show some support. And you know, I think it's important to understand that in sharing my life story, you know, the purpose is to just share what I went through, the decisions I made that put me through that, and then, you know, at one level give insight to who I am now and why I am the way I am. I guess it gives some insight to that, probably not every bit of insight, but then also maybe some learnings for those of you that are, you know, going to be parents at some point in time. I don't know how many kids are going to listen to this, so I don't know how helpful that would be, but you know, I definitely went through a good amount of experiences, and I feel like sharing those are important, and I think sharing those are not only therapeutic for you as an individual, but also I think it's nice to hear. I really enjoy hearing what other people have been through in their life, and it's one of my favorite things to learn about people. So kind of picking up on where we left off, I kind of brought you to what I consider life in sort of peaks and valleys, and most of my life for you know, the first half of my life now, as I get older, there were a lot of valleys, and self-induced. I was, you know, it's new low, and that was so you know obviously getting arrested there was the new low, and then getting picked up by, you know, the goons at 2 or 3 in the morning was another new low. And, you know, just things that, you know, from transitioning, you know, back into the stories, I'll never forget that feeling of when I saw the look on my father's face, and it was clear that something was happening. I was getting, you know, taken away, and I knew that it would be business when I went to the bathroom, and they followed me into the bathroom and didn't let me out of their sight, as I was, quote, and as you'll learn in shortly, I was considered a run risk. So they, you know, we walked through the airport. They had zip ties around my hands as I drove in the car. They had their hand on my seatbelt latch. You know, I just remember getting into a car. There was someone driving and someone next to me. We drove from where I lived in New York all the way to the city, to the airport. And, you know, like in the moment, you're kind of delirious. You know, and you don't have the scope of knowledge and experience that you have now. So I can only imagine what people thought about when I was walking through the airport with, you know, zip ties around my around my wrists, and you know, because they thought I was going to run or whatever it might be. And it was just one of those things where, like, you look back on it now and it's like I'm still embarrassed, and I'm still, like, the thought process of that still is like, gosh, like, that's awful, you know. And it's just not anything that you would ever expect or want to happen, and it was happening. But also denial. Like, denial is such a strong thing that humans can put themselves through. And, like, I just remember thinking that this wasn't real. This is not going to happen. Like, you're convincing yourself that whatever situation you're in isn't real. And it's obviously a tactic that you can use in a lot of situations in life. But I just remember utilizing that tactic for a long time, to cope, to avoid what was actually happening. And, you know, we flew, you know, and they're like, I asked where we were going. Like, you're going to Utah. And we fly out to Utah, and drive out to this like base camp type of thing. And I just remember getting there, and it's like a little, you know, crappy little building, and you know, there's not a lot going on there, but, you know, I remember that they took all my belongings. They searched me thoroughly. And then from there, they'd take a picture, ask you a few questions, give you a backpack that's fully packed up with camping gear, you know, with the sleeping bag and you name it. And then from there, we, you know, put my boots on, put me into some vehicle. They put a blindfold on me, and drove me from now where I know where I was going, I drove to a base camp in the Uintas in Utah. At the time, obviously, I didn't know where I was going. As I was blindfolded, they didn't want me to see the route in which we took to get there, so I couldn't know how. So I didn't have reference on if I wanted to escape. It sounds crazy when you talk about it, I know. So we get there, and they take the blindfold off, and you're in the woods, and there's a group of kids. And these kids, they're just they look like a bunch of haggard, nomads, essentially. We're all wearing the same type of gear. It's like all just green shirts and cargo pants and your boots. Everyone's got the same boots, and so everyone has their own stuff. People that have been there longer might have a different color, different issue type of things. Newer people have the same stuff. So it's this eerie sense of, you can tell tenure of how long people have been out there before you even understood the system. Some people look like they've been out there a long time by how long their facial hair was or how haggard and beat up they look. So you get out, and they just drop you off, and the next thing you know, it's all right, your world is now different again. So within 24 hours, you're pulled out of bed, you're flown across the country, you're kind of stripped down of everything you got, you're given some new, issued material, and then now you're in the woods. And that's what we called it, the woods. So I'll reference that, the woods. Because apparently it was a bigger business, and later on down the road for my next step after this, it was a rite of passage. So you'd actually talk about it with other people that were in the woods. So we we get out there, and you have no idea what's going on, but I'll just in summary, with the first week, 2 weeks, we were actually building trail in the Uintas. So we had a base camp, and we would hike up, and we'd have tools, and we'd build trail, and that's what we did. There were different levels. So so it was a tiered system. You started at, I think it was earth phase, and that means you're essentially like a peasant. You're brand new. You don't have a lot of responsibilities, nor do you have a lot of respect and trust. So I couldn't eat any hot food until I was able to, what they called, bust a fire. When you do that, you get to fire phase. So you have to learn how to make a fire with a spindle and a bow and a baseboard and all that stuff. So for the first couple of weeks, you're just eating dehydrated beans and rice, and they drop off food once a week, so you get actual meat once a week, things like that. You don't get hot water or anything like that. So they put hot water in it, but you don't get to eat hot food. It's you're just adapting to this, and you have a shelter that you make every night. So you'd have a tarp, and then you'd have to make your own shelter. So obviously you have no idea how to do that. So you kind of make crappy shelters in the beginning, and you have your sleeping bag. And since I was a run risk, and I was for a while, I don't know why, they would take my shoes, and they took all of our shoes, but they would take my shoes at base camp. So I had to walk around in socks, which was awful, around the camp. But then at night, I'd have a counselor or a staff member. They would actually sleep right next to me, and they would have a tarp wrapped around my sleeping bag and then underneath their sleeping bag. So if I made any movement, they would hear it, and it would be, they would wake up. So it was, that was what I was, dealing with based off my decisions there. So I'll never forget that, and it was awful walking around base camp without shoes on, but you gotta sleep in the bed that you make. So we did that for a couple of weeks, and learning about these people out there, it was pretty amazing. It's I was 17 years old, and we're talking kids that, the people you're next to were, similar age, but I mean, gosh, from the things that we were doing, they were, kids getting arrested all over the place, doing drugs, stealing things, doing awful things. It was, and these were kids, and these were, at the time, I saw kids come off, meth and drugs like that, and detox, and it was ruthless. And this was a world I was not really exposed to. I was what I did was, almost, there's a catalyst in this sort of apex of what I did, which is awful, but, it was a still relatively sheltered, life from that perspective. It wasn't, I wasn't doing a lot of the things that these other kids were doing. Coping mechanisms are different, and that's all that is. You realize that. So I think people judge a lot of people based off what their actions are, but everyone's coping mechanisms are different. But the sort of what is the impetus behind a lot of that, we learned is relatively simple. We did a lot of therapy out there. So therapists would come out twice a week and kind of talk to you, do stuff. You'd talk around the campfire and things like that at night. They called war stories. You weren't allowed to talk about war stories, glorifying what you did, how you did it, and those things. But we tried to talk about, sort of productive applications of what we did and what we're thinking about. And I just remember, we'd have a journal, write a journal, and I write letters, and just things that you realize about relationships, things that stuck with me to this day. So at this point, it was end of the summer, so we're going into my senior year. So, it was clear that at first, in the first couple of weeks, I was like, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna make it back for my senior year. I'm gonna play football. I'm gonna, get prom and all that other stuff. And then, as the days ticked by, which it was hard to keep track of the actual time, but you could keep relative track. You're like, I'm not going to go home. You realize, I was out there for 2 months, and keep in mind, there's no contact with anyone else other than the people in your group and the staff that switched weekly. That's it. No other contact. You'd write letters. The therapist would come out twice a week. You give them the letters, and they would send them. You would get letters from your family or the people you were allowed to write. And I just remember I was writing people, and I wouldn't get letters back. And you learn a lot about your friends and your acquaintances, and it's what circles you run in. And unfortunately, most of us, when you find disingenuous or not true relationships, they don't stick through the hard times. The people that mattered wrote me back, which were very few. So when people ask me about my friends in my life prior, it's I have 1 or 2 people I talk to. That's about it from my whole life, almost prior to and almost through college, which is crazy. When you think about it, a lot of people have a lot of those relationships for their whole life. For me, I don't. Very fortunate that I have unbelievable friends that I call family now. But that's my squad. So it just became very clear that I was going to be missing my senior year, not going home, writing these letters and not getting letters back from people I thought were my friends and thought were my family, and that was one of the biggest. It took a while to let that sink in. I just remember you'd sit in the woods against a tree, and when you had time to write in the journal, and you just I would just sit there write in the journal. I would just cry, and you just break down. You have moments of breakdown, and where you're just thinking, and at that point in most people's life at that age, you don't have those times just to think. Evaluate your decisions that you made, and you're mad, you're frustrated, you're all of these emotions, and it's embarrassing, it's disappointing. And so I just remember sitting there and just coming to the realization that your actions finally have caught up with you, and now there are reactions, there are consequences for what you have done and your behaviors. And unfortunately, it's a tough pill to swallow when you realize that the life you've been living, you sort of, again, you cope by avoiding or things like that. And that's a difficult one. And in the moment, I don't think I had the ability to process this out like I am now. But the feelings were there, the emotions were there, just falling apart was there. And that's what that's where it needed to be. And it was unique. It was such a unique experience. I spent 2 months out in the woods, and it's funny. There are skills that I learned there that I take to this day. I know how to, live out in the woods. No, we weren't hunting and living off the land, but we were living in the Uintas. We then went to the desert when it got to, towards the winter as we dipped towards the fall. So learned about just a different world, the different ecosystems and the weather, and hanging bear bags and digging latrines, and what it's like to hike 11 miles a day, and like almost stepping on a rattlesnake because it was cold, and you don't obviously, most people don't have those experiences, and some are enjoyable for when they learn that stuff. For us, it was sort of bittersweet. Learning how to make a fire, learning how to do this stuff, and you can joke about it now, but it's cool to be able to have those things. So there's absolutely some value there, and there's a part of me that, in the moment, like, you try to find enjoyment in it. And it's weird to think like that, because you want to hate it. You want to not like it. If things are happening to you that you're unhappy about, you want to. The defiant person in you and me was like, I want to not enjoy this process. And then I started to succumb to the situation and just be in the moment and just like, okay, I'm out here. And when you forget about what ifs, all right, I'm like, when you lose sight of like, I'm not going, like, it's almost like you're not going home. Like, every time you saw the therapist, you're like, how to get an idea of when you were getting out of there. If someone left, so when people would leave, they would just get into a car and you wouldn't even know it, and they would be gone. You wouldn't even know. They'd pick you up in the middle of the night sometimes, and you'd leave. You'd never say goodbye, depending on where you were at. Sometimes parents would come out and visit the kids. You knew that was, they didn't want that to happen, but the parents needed to see their kid, and obviously rightfully so. They just couldn't take it. And so you'd see all this happening, and I remember when we saw another group. So obviously there were many groups hiking through the woods, and it was a mistake. And like, we weren't supposed to look at it, and I just remember it was an all boys, it was all boys, and obviously there were other all girls groups, and it was a girls group, and we, a bunch of 17-year-olds that hadn't seen a girl in like 2 months, 3 months for some, and it's just it was so funny. I just remember like the conversations, the thought processes they're going through. We're just a bunch of idiots, but like, those are things you just don't realize in life, like it was. I'll never forget that. Of course, you don't forget that, but it's just kind of funny. You're like, oh, it's a bunch of girls, like we haven't literally seen them, and like, because like when you're with guys that we were, it's like you just start your mindset, your lifestyle changes a little bit. Certainly when you're so isolated. So that always brings a little smile when I think about it. But it was, and then after you realized you weren't leaving when you wanted to, when you realize you're going to be out there a long time, 2 months, a long time, when you don't have a concept of time. It's like, it's different. Like, you think, wow, 2 months flies by now, but when you're in the woods hiking, things like that, it's like, and it's different. And then you realize that there's a next step. You realize that you're not going home after the woods. I was convinced that this was the end game. This was the end state, that, okay, I'm going to spend 2-3 months out here. That's what the average was. And then I'm going to go home. And we're going to figure it out. But that wasn't the case. It became clear that this was a stepping stone to something bigger. And that's when reality set in. That's when it got scary. That's when I realized I probably would never see most of the people in my life again. That I surrounded myself with, because the next step was what you call this is a therapeutic boarding school of some sort. There was a bunch, obviously different names, I had no idea, but you hear and where people were going, and that was what we were doing, and you didn't know where you were going, but you had to. And I remember having to sit and take all these different tests and things like that. You take these tests, like 1,000 questions, and they just ask you like weird things, like, do you hear voices? And they ask you those questions 6, 7, 8, 9 times, just in different ways. And you're like, clearly they're trying to see if I'm insane. That's at least what I thought to myself. And then I tried to start to play the game of like, hey, I'm fine, like almost like, I'm good, I got this, I don't need to go anywhere. And that clearly didn't work. Like, you try to, people are smart, and a lot of kids are very good at manipulating and putting on a good show, but most people are smarter and stronger-willed, certainly if you don't have an emotional connection. And that was sort of the premise of this second nature, which is where I was. But the woods was, in summary, life-changing. I'll never forget it. I thought it was going to be the end state, but it was just the start of a long, dramatic journey into figuring out who I was and who I am. And by no means was it the lowest valley in my life either, which, makes me sad. In retrospect, it did shape who I am now, but it started the long line of making mistakes and then having to dig out of it. This was the first one where it was done for me. Right? My dad was like, this is where you're going and this is what you're going to do, which allowed me to not, that was sort of my, punishment. That was, and also, hopefully therapy out, and then this school, which is going to be the next episode. So, but as you get older in life, people don't do that for you, and you have less of those opportunities, and those are things I realized, but again, after the fact, and fortunately enough, I was able to start to figure this stuff out at some point. So we're about 21 minutes in, we'll cut it there. 2 months in the woods. Now we transition to Carlbrook, which is the therapeutic boarding school that I spent 2 years at after the 2 months in the woods. So that's where we'll go next. Hopefully you find some value in this. Learn a little bit. If you have questions, shoot it in the comments. Hit me up. Just send me an email. I really hope you appreciate this. I enjoy sharing the journey, and I guys really appreciate it. The Soapbox, Austin Malleolo. Boom. We'll see you.